Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ronin's Den. I'm Steve. I'm here with my co host Eric, as well as our players from last week's one shot, Benny and Midnight Tavern. Thank you all for joining us again.
Thank you
We
for
are
having me.
going to be doing a system review and breakdown of the Alien RPG. As we all know, we played that last week, and it was interesting to say the least. There was sabotage and subterfuge, and I believe only one player made it out alive.
And I believe that was
But
the one that put a boot up somebody's ass as
Not
well.
it. Not it.
You reach a certain
anyway,
age, you start to wonder what you're going to be remembered for, and for me, it's apparently that. Go on.
I do know that anytime I reference this game, I'm going to bring up the time that the Colonial Marine kicked a man down the steps instead of protecting him. But anyway, as
It
we
was
do
all
with
in good
every
fun.
yeah, obviously. But as we do every time we play a one shot on this channel, we try to bring everyone back and do a review of the system, talking about what we liked, what we didn't like, what we would like to see, and just our overall thoughts. And once again, we're gonna start. Let's start with Benny. Why don't you give us your overall thoughts?
Overall, it was great. It might be my favorite of the systems we've reviewed. I've played a lot of TTRPGs this year, both with you guys and with other people, and it's an excellent system.
All right.
A little bit more specifically, it had enough depth to it to be interesting, but it wasn't so convoluted that it was hard to pick up and play.
Okay. Midnight.
I loved it. I thought it was really good. I really love the mechanic on the stress and the building of stress. And it's not just that it's a detrimental thing to build the stress, it's a potential bonus as well, because the more stressed you are, the more chances of success you have. But those failures can really start to hurt at that point. Um, I was definitely intimidated a bit by looking at the character sheet at first, but then after you kind of get into it, it's like, okay, it's just a different layout with a couple extra little spots, and it was not as intimidating as it initially appeared to be. So, overall, definitely, I had a lot of fun with it, and I thought it was a pretty easy system to understand.
Eric.
Pretty much the same thing as Midnight said. And Benny said, it's an easy to pick up system. Little bit intimidating on the first look at the character sheet, but it flows really nicely once you get into play, especially with the automation tools that Roll20 had in place for it. And the stress was a nice mechanical addition. It's a detriment, but it's also a bonus. And it has a lot of unique things that could happen when it gets invoked as well. It wasn't just like a static, oh, your stress is building, you miss every time. Or, you freeze in terror every time, even though I just kind of froze up quite a bit just by luck of the dice. But there's a whole bunch of different things that can happen from it. So I actually really enjoyed that part of it.
Speaking of the dice, how did you guys feel about the dice mechanic? It's actually a pretty simple dice pull system. You use your attribute, you use your skill, you add those together, you roll that set number of dice. 6 is a success. Anything below that is not. The stress dice obviously add that little bit of a wrinkle, but it seems like it's a pretty straightforward and easy one. I just want to know what you guys think about that. Let's start with Midnight this time.
Um, it's refreshing to not have to think, okay, that's a D20, that's a D4, that's a D8, that's a D. It's just all D6s. I like that. Um, the simplicity of it was really nice. I can talk about the system stuff later, but yeah, I think overall it was great. It was just easy. It was a bunch of D6s, and you just kept getting more and more and more D6s. So as you roll them and you start seeing all these numbers show up, it feels like you're getting kind of more intense reaction to rolling it because you're just rolling so many of them. And then in terms of rolling with Roll20, it was easy. You click a button and it spits everything out, so you didn't have to do the math, which was nice. But yeah, just get that whole handful. It reminds me of old school like Shadowrun or whatever, when you had just like the wall of dice you would roll for stuff that you did. So I liked it.
Yep.
All right, Eric.
I was going to bring up the Shadowrun reference myself because the mechanic is remarkably similar. It's attribute plus skill. Only in Shadowrun, it's 5s and 6s that are successes, not just straight the straight 6. But with that familiarity getting into it, it was really easy for me to pick up. I really like the system. It was really fun.
All right, Benny.
Yeah, the dice mechanic, I think I mentioned it at the time. It reminded me a lot of the Vampire the Masquerade dice mechanic, where as you go, you can wind up accruing more and more hunger, which can be positive or negative depending on how it goes. And I like that system a lot. I like the way that it builds tension through the game. I think that really works well with the horror mechanic that whatever you do, it's more likely to be drastic the more stressed out and upset you are.
All right. So Midnight, you said you had some thoughts about the system and the mechanics. What were some of the thoughts you wanted to bring up?
So, it's the alien role playing, universe. So the big bad is the aliens, and you can have variations on them, but in the end, they're xenomorphs. They're big, they're bad, they're scary. You can't hit them in close combat because of the acid blood. But it's not like all kinds of other things on the surface. I mean, you could have some I guess some political intrigue, you could have some double crossing, you could vary it a little bit, but it still feels very kind of limited. And I know that they have, the three cinematic kind of modules that go for it that give you this story to play. But like Dungeons and Dragons, you can run anything with Dungeons and Dragons. This feels, because it's related to Alien, like you could take the system away from the game and just use the system, and it would work. But it definitely feels like this is a short-term campaign, like, maybe 5 to 10 sessions or whatever, rather than like that ongoing campaign that people play for like years and years on end. So that's my only kind of like hesitation on it. And I know that they're coming out with second edition of Alien. They're going to be doing that on Kickstarter soon, so I'm interested to see what it is that they're adding to it, rather than different expansion books. But again, it's Alien. Unless you're going to start bringing in other IPs, it feels like it's a limited universe to play in, and that's my only like drawback to it.
I can understand that. I think though that also is kind of the appeal of it as well. Like when you sit down to play the Alien RPG, it's the easiest pitch in the world. Hey, want to play this TTRPG? You're playing an Alien movie. It it builds the tension. It is limited in the sense you're not going to run a year-long campaign in it, but what it does, I think it excels at. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I agree, and I don't think every system actually needs to be built to run those mega long campaigns or be all encompassing in scope either. I think that actually can like limit a system more so than expanding it at times, because there's just a bloat of what it's capable of doing, so it doesn't do anything particularly well. Like you could do everything with it, sure. D&D is a good example. I can run everything from a high seas pirate adventure to, if I really wanted to hack the system apart, I can run a My Littlest Pet Shop dating simulator inside of a Starbucks. But and I could do that for 5 years. I mean, but at the same time, there's
Is he
not.
having a stroke or am I?
You know what? There's a fandom out there.
There
Don't
is a fandom out
don't
there.
there
Um,
is.
but I mean, the point I'm trying to make is that system is so wide that it doesn't actually capture a single thing and do it in a specialized manner. It's just a bunch of okay mechanics. Whereas Alien, yeah, it's hyper specific. I actually feel like this system's great for one shot play more so than anything episodic. Like, we're going to play 2, maybe 2.5 hours. It's the equivalent of sitting through an Alien movie. And maybe we do a sequel with different characters another week. Maybe we take a few months off and play other things. But it does that tension building, that horror. It keeps you afraid of the alien, moving on. It doesn't like put you into, oh, I'm going to turn into murder hobo murder face here, because I can hack the system apart and do that. So this system does what it does very well. It fails outside of what it's designed to do, and I actually think that's a good thing. I like that.
I'd also see that you could, if you took the alien out of it, you could run a couple other horror style games, in something like this. Like I could see, without having run the system itself, like you could bring Shiver and use the alien system to run a Shiver game where you're playing a horror monster movie against one of the big other scary monsters. Maybe even do like a mothership with this system. I think you could pull off pretty well. So I think the system itself could be used when you have those games that are supposed to ramp up the tension, ramp up the paranoia, and just get to an ultimate climax in your story in a short period of time. I think that could work too.
Mm-hmm.
Broadly speaking, I agree with Eric. One of the problems with something like D&D or even Pathfinder is that you're playing your campaign and you're going to slay the dragon. So you level up a couple of times, you get into the dragon's lair, you have your boss fight. And then what now? Is the campaign over, or are we doing something else? And so you can kind of lose the plot of whatever it was you originally set out to do, either because what you set out to do was done or because somebody wanted to keep the campaign going. They keep adding new stuff. Whereas with this one, it does tend to that very straightforward, this is what it is, and this is all it is. I think if I was going to try to run a longer campaign with it, the biggest hindrance to that would be that my understanding is you don't really level up in this system, which I'm always a fan of just improving over time. But also because of the fact that you lose characters so frequently, it makes it a lot harder to build up that camaraderie, that feeling of like we've been on this adventure for a long time together. So whatever happens between you, like say hypothetically some sort of betrayal, not that anybody at this table would ever do that, it carries more meaning and weight when you have many sessions behind you together and then something happens.
But
yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah, I was gonna say, in a way, don't you feel like that kind of captures that alien movie kind of vibe too? Like everybody's just on the ship by circumstance, and it's like, we don't like that guy. He's kind of an asshole. And do you know me? No, I don't really know you. Hey, I did one mission with you like 10 years ago on this one rock. And yeah, by the end of the movie, 1 or 2 people make it out alive. Sometimes because they kick another one in the back down a flight of stairs. Other times because they just so happen to hit the door locking mechanism just before the alien makes it through the cargo bay.
So you get D&D where you're trying to play that epic hero. This system really lets you play that cowardly backstabber, like me before everyone else type character. You get so many you get a lot of opportunities to do that. I think.
So one of the things that we didn't really touch on that much in this one shot because it was kind of a limited time, but if you look at the cinematic ones like Chariot of the Gods or the other ones, they break it into 3 acts where you have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and every character has a personal agenda, something they're trying to achieve or do, and then every act it changes. So, like Chariot of the Gods, I would say probably would take 3 sessions to run, but 3 sessions to me is still a one shot. I wish that we could have played more with that a little bit, but having that personal agenda, that secret mission that only your character knows, adds to that. Can I trust this person? It adds another layer to that horror because you don't actually know what everyone's goal is. Somebody theoretically could know exactly what's going on here. They could know about the alien, they could know about the massacre, and they're just here for one little thing. They need to get this one item and get the hell out.
Yeah. Like,
But so how did you guys feel about that? Because I put some that were kind of intriguing, but I wish I was better at writing those.
I like my personal agenda. I put it into effect right away. And it probably put everybody in a lot more danger. But I was going to accomplish my side quest of get all the information, wipe the database, and get out of Dodge. But at the same time, it was masked as allowing us to find the cargo we were supposed to pick up and get out with. Even though the smart decision would have been like, hey, there's dead bodies here in the control room right at the docking station. Let's call this in and fly back out to orbit and wait for the Marines to show up and clear the bug nest. Even though we don't know it's a bug nest, but, have law enforcement do a sweep of it. But I was like, no. So, yeah, I like personal agendas. I think it adds to the story.
With the 3-act thing, I know that I think we kind of split it up between Act 1 and 2, sort of, because you did call for a point to say, all right, everyone who's got your agenda, if you've been pursuing it, that's where you get the points in. Mine was a very simple one, but it didn't come into play yet, which was nothing gets off of this rock and goes back to Earth. Making sure that no bugs come with us, eliminate everything. The Ripley kind of mentality of just kill it all, leave it all here. We don't want to mess with this. But I think the idea of the agenda is interesting because it prevents you from playing smart if you're, smart about what you're doing. In this case, you see all the dead bodies. Look, you uploaded Mother into the computer system, have her download all the data. We don't need to leave the loading dock. We can sit right there and wait till we get all the information that we need, and then we just leave. But because you wanted to get to the data servers and hook up to that and get that data and erase it, that brings you further into the story. So it makes you kind of delve into something else, which is what's going to increase the interest, increase the risk, increase the tension in it, which I liked.
With my character, his goal was pretty simple. He was a well-respected soldier, and his deal was just to continue to act in an honorable manner. And of course, with the way it turned out,
really,
yeah. And so it was an interesting, So it was an interesting final moment there, where it's like, well, I can either feed this alien and survive and fail at my personal quest, or I can feed my teammate to the alien, and I can tell the story however I want if I'm the only survivor.
I mean, you kind of did keep your reputation because the other two died. You're the only one. What happened? We were ambushed. They got it. I couldn't do anything. But yeah. Another thing, the only person who got to really mess with the critical injuries chart, I believe, was Midnight. Yep. And that is another thing. I wish we could have got more, but the alien wasn't hitting for crap. I could not roll for shit. But
you rolled high enough.
Essentially, when you get hit by the alien, you drop to 0. You don't die. You take a critical injury, and you roll a D66, and they vary from... One second. Something as simple as you're winded, crippling pain, all the way to impaled heart. So when you roll, you could theoretically get like a broken hand. You just can't use one of your hands. Like I said, in the first Alien one-shot I ever ran for Grimstone Gaming, one of the people at the end of the game had 2 arms that didn't function, a slash across her stomach where part of her intestines were hanging out, and a bad leg. She didn't die to the alien. She died because she couldn't get out of the base before it self-destructed. So where you're kind of like down and you could theoretically die in one bad roll, you could just continue to keep going and going and going. So, I don't know, Midnight, what were your thoughts on that part of it? Because the other two didn't really get to experience it.
I just think it's interesting. One, because it's actually just recently was the first time I ever heard of the D66 table. You think, oh, there's 66 options. No, it makes it so you only need D6s to roll. So I like that it doesn't require additional dice. But the idea that, yeah, you get down to 0 hit points. All right, now you're going to roll the dice to see if you die or if you just suffer from this, and it adds more layers of things you have to deal with, which can also increase your stress and make everything else harder and or more likely to succeed or more likely to catastrophically fail. So I liked it. I thought it was cool. It's just like, all right, I'm not out. I'm hurt, but I'm not out. And it happened a couple of times, and I still wasn't out. And then I got the boot to the head, and then I was out.
Yeah. So, one of the questions we always ask in these breakdowns: did you feel that you were playing Alien the RPG? Did it feel like the game simulated the theme it was trying to? We'll start with Eric.
Absolutely. The system with the panic dice, it built that tension that you feel coming in the Alien movies. Like things start off really low, you're kind of everything's kind of meandering around, and then it just builds and builds and builds, and every decision is that much more dangerous as you go on. Something as simple as opening a door or trying to access a computer could hit catastrophic results by the end of the game. So I felt like it captured that part of the movies excellently. The aliens, you could fight them, and we did a couple times, but they were still at a level of power where it's like, we don't want to do this. Like, we can, but no. Like, our option should always be run, and as soon as we find that, we should run. So I think it captured those two elements of the movies perfectly.
Benny?
Yeah, it had the feeling of, even though I, the player, knew it, there was very much the sense that my character did not know what was going on. There was the sense of the tension because even though I, the player, knew that we were going to be facing the xenomorph, it was never obvious where they were coming from or exactly how it was going to go down. Didn't know how effective our weapons were going to be until we used them. And there was just this sense of this situation is getting increasingly unsalvageable. Like this is increasingly hopeless. And the panic die, it would have probably had that feeling without the panic die, but there was like a perfect synergy between that thematic flavor feeling and the mechanics of the panic die, I felt.
Midnight.
Yeah, this was that dream that just keeps getting worse and worse and worse, but you're actively participating in it. I definitely feel it. It's every horror movie that you watch, including Alien and Aliens, where you're just yelling at the screen, "No, don't do that! You're wasting time. Just go, just go!" And you're in the middle of it with your team, and you're just like, "Why are we making these stupid decisions? We should just get the hell out of here." But there's reasons for it, and it feels very much you're in it. You're in it. You're experiencing it, and you're having fun at the same time. But you're also like, oh, this is getting really bad, and it just keeps getting worse.
A feeling of watching a movie and wanting to get up in the middle of the theater and shout, "Run, the monster's coming," but you're in a TTRPG.
Yep.
That is a great way to put it. And then, as always, the final question: scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this game? Midnight.
It's high on the fun factor. Um, it's sad that it's not a longer term because they've tied it to Alien. I mean, I could see doing some work to create a much longer thing where the aliens pop in and out, and you're dealing with more of the like political, or you're now on the run, and these things are kind of looming in the background. Definitely a 7 or 8. It was really good, really fun. It's sad that you don't feel like you could go a long game with it because I would really like to spend a lot of time here. It was really fun.
Benny.
As a pick up and play, just something you do once in a while with friends and not trying to run a campaign, I'm going to go 9 out of 10. And the reason why it's not a 10 out of 10, and this is a small thing and admittedly something of a matter of personal preference. Anytime, I'm a firm believer that anytime you have combat, you need some kind of battle map just so you can orient where things are in relation to other things. And the system didn't seem to provide that. But yeah, I mean, for just a game to pick up and play, it's top shelf. For running a campaign, it's just not built for it. It's just not. I don't want to rate it because it's just not there.
Fair. Eric.
So I'm only going to give my rating based on playing it in its specific intended purpose. Like, you are going to play this as you're doing a 2.5, 3 hour session of an alien movie. And I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. And that's because I hadn't gotten the chance to experience some of those other mechanics that we talked about tonight. So I don't know if they would actually add to that. But at this point, since I didn't experience them, they can't take away from it either. And I feel that it captured that I am playing an alien movie perfectly. And so if you're going to play it with that intent behind, I'm going to give it that 9 out of 10.
I think that's one of the highest rated games we've had on this.
I think it's probably the highest, to be honest with you.
So
Actually, I have a question for Midnight. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I have a question for Midnight. Would you rate the game any higher if there was a specific mechanic that stopped you from attacking your teammates?
I would rank it lower, honestly, if there was, because this is a game built on increasing amount of stress and fear, and you're going to find out who you really are in those moments. And some people are strong in those moments, and some people are cowards in those moments, and sometimes it's fun in those moments. And I think if you prevented that from happening, you would honestly be taking away from the theme of an alien movie. Especially when you have the company man, you have the Marine, you have the civilian and whatnot, that whole interplay of stereotypes and whatnot, it would totally take away from the game to prevent people from attacking each other.
Also, one of the panic options that you guys didn't get, I think it's like one of the 2 highest you can get, is absolute chaos, where you just start attacking anyone or anything near you. Friend, enemy, computers, it doesn't matter. You just start attacking everything until you calm down. So PvP is definitely built in. And I think I even said in the TikTok that I made, it's one of those games where PvP doesn't feel out of place. It almost feels like it's not traumatic or problematic because you haven't invested years in this character and then somebody just being a dick kills your character. Yeah. This is one of those situations where it made sense that I need to save my own skin. Either we're all dying or that guy can die. So I like that the game kind of facilitates that in a very unique way.
I feel like that could be a problem with the wrong kind of player, although I guess that's true with any TTRPG. But I feel like you could always have the possibility of having that one problem player who's taking this is just an excuse to attack my teammates or be belligerent at all times. It didn't come up this time because we had a good table.
Or the flip side of it is the person takes it very personally when they get betrayed. And they're like, why did you do that? Why would you do? You could have that. I definitely think you need to have the right mix of people for this type of game, but it lends itself somewhat easier to that because it's one of those, you have other characters waiting in the wings. We had 4 other characters sitting on the drop ship just in case we needed it. Like if we had played for another half hour, I would have just taken over one of those characters and then continued the story and had a chance to do something different but continue in that sense. I probably would have had no stress to start with, which would have been fantastic. But yeah, it could definitely go bad if you've got the wrong person who can't take the game for what it's supposed to be. It's a horror movie. Everyone dies. If you're ready for that, let's play.
I do think Benny handled that really well. He did ask first. you did ask, hey, this is what I think would be the most interesting. Would you be upset? And you're like, no, that sounds fucking cool. So
Yeah, I did.
like, so I think it comes down to that always communication. Communication is always important. But as the game mother, because that's what this game calls it, the game mother, because the ship's computer is mother, I would rank this as probably also a 9 out of 10 to run. Everything is really straightforward, really simple. The mechanics of the game are very easy. You can throw together a session in about an hour if you really want to. The aliens are all mapped out in the book. It's it's just a fun, easy game to put together, and I enjoyed running it. I hope to run it more in the future.
And I do got to give
Alright.
you kudos because I forgot the fact you literally did ask, and with it being a table of people who don't normally play together, fantastic way to approach it. But yeah, I was definitely like, no, that sounds really fun, and that makes total sense for this scene, and just go with it, just do it.
All right. Does anyone have any final thoughts or anything they want to add before Eric takes us out?
I had a great time. I really appreciate it.
Likewise.
Thank you. Eric, take us out.
All right. Well, that's our review for the Alien TTRPG. I think we can all agree so far that this is probably one of the better horror TTRPGs out there. The next one shot is going to be Ryutama, which is going to be run by Joe from the Discord server as well. That'll be sometime at the end of next month. And we got a couple fabulous Ultima character builds coming up in the meantime. All right, so we will catch everybody next week for another episode of Ronin's Den.